The paramedic had already called my parents by the time I realized what was happening. I was lying on the floor of the accounting firm where I'd worked for 6 years, and my colleague Diane was kneeling beside me, pressing her cardigan against the side of my head where I'd hit the corner of the filing cabinet on the way down. I remember thinking absurdly that it was a nice cardigan. My parents lived 23 minutes away. I know this because I'd made that drive every Sunday for the past 4 years, showing up with groceries and a smile and a very specific kind of exhaustion that I never let them see. My husband Neil was listed as my emergency contact. That's important. That part matters. I don't know exactly what my mother said to the paramedic. I wasn't conscious long enough to hear her full response. But Diane told me later, and Diane doesn't exaggerate. My mother apparently said, "Can it wait? We're in the middle of something." The something, I found out later, was my younger brother's car insurance situation. My brother Cody is 29 years old. He still has his car insurance under my parents' plan because removing him would cost him $40 more per month. And my parents don't think that's fair, given how much he's already dealing with. What he's dealing with specifically is a $310 fine he'd received that morning for running a red light in Mississauga. My parents were on the phone with the insurance company, trying to understand if the ticket would affect his premium. I was unconscious on the floor of my office with a concussion and a suspected cervical spine injury. Can it wait? I want you to sit with that for a second. I grew up the eldest of 2. There's me, and there's Cody. And from the time Cody was born, I understood, in the way that children understand things before they have words for them, that the rules were different for him. Not dramatically, not in ways that would have been obvious to anyone looking in. My parents never said out loud that they loved him more. They just showed it in 400 small ways over 32 years. He got the bigger bedroom. He got picked up from parties at 2 a.m. without complaint. When he failed his first year of college, my parents paid for him to retake it and told everyone he'd taken a gap year to travel. When he wrecked his first car at 24, my dad helped him finance a new one. When I wrecked my bicycle at 11, my dad told me I should have been more careful. I'm not bitter. Or I wasn't, not in a way I ever let fester. I became a CPA. I married Neil, who is the most decent human being I've ever met, and we have a daughter named Iris, who is 6 years old and recently informed me that caterpillars feel things. I built a life that felt genuinely good. I also kept showing up. Every Sunday, groceries, smile, exhaustion hidden. When Neil and I got married, I updated almost everything. My name, my car registration, my work benefits. I did not update my emergency contact at the firm. It was still my parents' number. And oversight, the kind of thing you don't think about until it matters. It mattered at 3:47 on a Thursday afternoon in November, when I stood up too fast from my desk, felt something wrong, moved through my head like a wave, and went down hard. Neil was in a meeting. He had his phone on silent. He didn't see the missed calls until 4:22, by which point Diane had already tried my parents twice, and I'd been in an ambulance for 20 minutes. The hospital called my parents as well. The nurse who spoke to my mother, I later learned her name was Tamara, and she was very kind, told her that I had been brought in by ambulance, that I was unconscious, and that they needed a family member present. My mother asked if it was life-threatening. Tamara said they were still assessing. My mother said they would come when they could. They could, apparently, at 7:15 p.m. Neil arrived at 4:58. He had sprinted, I think literally sprinted, from his office 2 blocks from the hospital when he finally saw his phone. He burst through the emergency department doors with his coat half on and one earbud still in, and the first thing he said to Tamara was, "I'm her husband. What do we need to do?" He signed the consent forms. He sat beside my bed. He held my hand while I drifted in and out and told him, apparently, that I was worried about a client file I'd left open on my computer. He told me it was fine. He told me everything was fine. When I finally came back to myself, fully, clearly, it was almost 6 o'clock. Neil was still there. He'd gotten Diane to pick up Iris from school and take her back to our place. He'd called his mother to go stay with Iris until we knew more. He had handled everything with a quietness and a competence that made my chest ache. "Your parents aren't here yet," he said. He didn't say it with any particular tone. He just said it the way you'd say it about the weather. "I know," I said. "They called about an hour ago. Your mom said they'd been dealing with Cody insurance thing." I nodded. My head hurt enormously. I closed my eyes. "The ticket," I said. "Yeah, $310. Neil was quiet for a moment. "Something like that." I had a grade 2 concussion and a soft tissue injury to my neck. No fracture, which was lucky given how I'd fallen. The doctor told me I'd need to take 2 weeks off work, avoid screens where possible, and come back immediately if my symptoms worsened. He was thorough and calm, and spoke to both me and Neil like adults, which I appreciated. My parents arrived at 7:15. My mother walked in first, looking slightly put upon, the way she looks when she's driven through traffic and wants you to know it. My father followed with his hands in his jacket pockets. "You look fine," my mother said by way of greeting. "Concussion," Neil said. His voice was pleasant. "They always say concussion," my mother said. "When your uncle fell off his ladder, they said concussion and he was back at work in 3 days." I looked at my father. He was looking at the floor. "The paramedics called you at 3:52, I said. "I know because Diane kept a log. We were on the phone," my mother said. "It wasn't a good time." "It wasn't a good time," I repeated. "Cody's premium could have gone up. You know how much he's already." "I almost didn't make it to the hospital," Neil said. Still pleasant, still quiet, the way he gets when he is very angry. The consent forms needed a family member or her spouse. I wasn't reachable for 40 minutes. If I hadn't gotten there when I did. "But you did," my mother said. That was the moment. That was the sentence that did it. Not the 3-hour wait. Not "can it wait?" Not the insurance call or the $40 premium or my brother's $310 fine that was apparently worth more than my body on a floor. It was those 2 words. "But you did. Like it had all worked out, so why were we talking about it? I want to tell you that I said something devastating. I want to tell you I had some perfect cutting response that left everyone in the room speechless." I didn't. My head hurt and I was tired and I just looked at my mother for a long time and then looked away. "You should go," I said. "I need to sleep." She looked surprised. My father looked relieved. They left. Neil reached over and took my hand again and didn't say anything. That was the right thing to do. He always does the right thing. I have been helping my parents financially since I was 26. At 26, I was the only employed person in my family for about 8 months. My father had been laid off, my mother had never really worked full-time, and Cody had just failed out of his second semester. I started transferring $400 a month into my parents' account, just until things stabilized. That's what I told myself. Things stabilized, the transfers continued. By the time of the concussion, I was sending $600 a month. My parents had never asked me to stop. I had never offered to. There was an unspoken agreement that this was simply how things were, and I had accepted it the way I'd accepted a lot of things. Quietly, Sunday by Sunday, with groceries and a smile. Neil had asked me once, just once, because he's not the type to push, why I kept doing it. "They're my parents," I said. "I know," he said, "but they're not exactly grateful." I didn't have a good answer for that. I don't think I'd ever looked for one. The 2 weeks I spent recovering were strange. I was home, mostly on the couch, mostly not allowed to look at my phone, mostly thinking. Iris would come home from school and sit beside me and tell me about her day in the very detailed, non-linear way that 6-year-olds tell you about their days. And I would listen, and it was genuinely the best part of each afternoon. On the 4th day, she climbed up next to me, settled herself against my arm and said, "Mama, are Grandma and Grandpa coming to visit?" "I don't think so." "Bug? Because you got hurt? Because they're busy?" She considered this with great seriousness. "Uncle Cody should pay his own ticket," she said. "Then they wouldn't be busy." I stared at her. "How do you know about the ticket?" Daddy said. She paused. "He said it wasn't a great moment for them, that's what he said. Not a great moment." That was, I thought, an extraordinarily generous characterization. On day 6, my mother called. I answered because I was trying to be a person who answered. "How are you feeling?" Better, slowly. You should try that vitamin D spray. You know the one I told you about. I'll look into it. She shifted. I could hear it, the small gear change. I wanted to mention, Cody's birthday is coming up in a few weeks. We were thinking of doing a dinner. Nothing big. Just family. Okay. And we thought maybe you and Neil could contribute to a gift. Since we're a bit stretched at the moment. I was quiet for 4 seconds. I counted. I'm still on leave, I said. Unpaid leave. Oh, I thought work would cover it. It doesn't. Well, it wouldn't have to be much. 150. I said I'd think about it. I hung up. I sat on the couch and looked at the wall for a while. Neil came in from the kitchen with 2 cups of tea, looked at my face and set them both down on the coffee table. Who called? My mom. He waited. Cody's birthday dinner, I said. She wants us to chip in for a gift. Neil sat down. He picked up his tea. He said, okay, in a way that meant he was not going to say anything else, because he knew I needed to get there myself. Here's what I had been circling for 6 days. I was on the floor, and they asked if it could wait. Here's what I had been unable to say out loud until that moment. It was always going to be like this. I could show up every Sunday for 30 more years. I could send $600 every month for the rest of my working life. I could forgive every small thing, and the big things too. And when I was on the floor, they would ask if it could wait, because Cody had a $310 fine and a premium to worry about. This was not something they would change. This was not something they were capable of changing. This was just who they were and who we were and how it had always been. I looked at Neil. I'm going to stop the transfers, I said. He nodded once. He didn't look surprised. He didn't look relieved. He looked like a man who loved his wife and had been waiting for her to be ready. All of it? He said. All of it. Okay, and I'm not going to chip in for the birthday gift. Okay, and I think I need to stop going every Sunday. He put his tea down and turned toward me fully. I think that sounds like a good idea. The transfers stopped the following Monday. I sent my mother a message. Clear, no anger, no long explanation. I said that with the medical leave and the recovery costs, Neil and I had decided to pause the monthly support. I said I hoped they understood. My mother called twice and sent 3 messages. The messages said things like, we're counting on that, and you know how tight things are, and I can't believe you'd do this right now. I did not respond to any of them. My father texted once. It said, your mother is very upset. No question. No, how are you feeling? No acknowledgement that 10 days earlier I had been on a floor with a spinal injury while they asked a paramedic if it could wait. I read it. I put my phone face down. I went and sat with Iris while she drew a picture of a caterpillar and explained to me, at length, what it was feeling. The birthday dinner happened without us. Cody apparently turned 30 with a cake and a new jacket and 2 parents who were, by all accounts, very attentive. I know this because my aunt texted to say it seemed like a lovely evening and she hoped we were feeling better soon. I sent back a heart emoji because that felt sufficient. 3 months later, my company announced its annual awards dinner. I've been with the firm for 6 years. I am, for various reasons I'll decline to enumerate with false modesty, good at my job. This year, my manager nominated me for the Regional Excellence in Practice Award. I won. The dinner was at a hotel downtown, the kind of place with tablecloths that get steamed and centerpieces that cost more than my first paycheck. There were about 200 people in the room. Neil wore the tie I'd given him for our anniversary and looked, honestly, wonderful. My parents were invited. This was my decision. I extended the invitation deliberately and clearly, because I had decided by that point that I was not interested in being the person who excluded anyone. I invited them, and they came. I saw my mother when she walked in. She'd had her hair done. She was wearing the blue dress she reserves for events where she wants to look like she tries. She waved. I waved back. We sat at different tables. Neil had arranged it. I hadn't asked him to, but he had, and I loved him for it. The dinner was nice. The salmon was good. The speeches ran about 12 minutes longer than they needed to, and then they called my name. I walked up to the front of the room. I shook hands with the regional director. I accepted a small crystal award that I will almost certainly put somewhere and never look at again. And then I turned to the microphone. I had not planned what I was going to say. Or rather, I had planned something sensible. Thank my team. Thank Neil. Mention the clients I'm proud to serve. I had that version ready. What I said instead was not that version. I said, I've been thinking a lot lately about what it costs to show up. For your work, for the people you love, for yourself, when that's the harder thing to do. I had a moment a few months ago where I was on the floor of my office, and the people I'd spent years showing up for, in every way I knew how, asked if my emergency could wait. And I realised that the cost of always being available is sometimes that no one notices the price. I paused. The room was very quiet. I want to thank my husband Neil, who did not ask if it could wait, who was there in 45 minutes, who signed the forms and held my hand and picked up our daughter's after-school routine without being asked. That's what showing up actually looks like. I stepped back from the microphone. The room started clapping. I did not look at my parents' table. I walked back to my seat, and Neil squeezed my hand under the table, and I stared straight ahead at the salmon I'd barely touched and breathed. We left before dessert. In the car on the way home, Neil said, "How do you feel? Honestly, always." "Like I just took the cardigan back," I said. He glanced at me. "The cardigan, Diane's cardigan. From when I feffel, I've been thinking about it. She gave something to help me without even thinking about it. Nobody asked her to." He was quiet for a second. "That's a good way to think about it." "I think so." My mother texted the next morning. The message said, "That was inappropriate and embarrassing, and I hope you're happy with yourself." I read it while Iris was eating her cereal. She looked up at me and said, "Who's that?" "Grandma." Iris went back to her cereal. Then she said, without looking up, "Is she upset that you got the award?" "Something like that," I said. "That's not very nice," Iris said matter-of-factly, and poured herself more milk. I put my phone in my bag and drank my coffee and watched my daughter finish her breakfast. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt like the weight I'd been carrying had been set down somewhere. Not thrown, not destroyed, just set down deliberately, on solid ground. I didn't respond to my mother's text that day, or the next, or the one after that. What I did do on the following Sunday was sleep in until 8:30. Neil made pancakes. Iris declared that hers needed to be shaped like a star, which Neil managed with a spoon and considerable patience. We ate breakfast in our pajamas and didn't go anywhere, and didn't bring anyone groceries, and didn't perform any particular version of anything for anyone. It was, I think, the best Sunday I can remember.